You're listening to Forever Fierce with Catherine Grace O'Connell, only on LA Talk Radio.
Welcome to Forever Fierce. I'm Catherine Grace O'Connell, and I'm delighted to be back here in the studio, and even more delighted to have an amazing woman on the show today. So my guest today is Magda Brown. Magda is a 91-year-old Holocaust survivor and passionate, enthusiastic speaker to keep the story of the Holocaust alive. So welcome to the show, Magda. Delighted to have you.
Thank you very much for inviting me and for the nice introduction.
You're so welcome. And small world that I actually grew up not too far from where you live right now, on the same street.
Well, that's the reason you found me.
I found you from that amazing article. But yeah, we both lived on Karlov in Skokie, Illinois. Really small world.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
So I found you by doing some research on the internet and coming across the article. Was it in the Washington Post?
Correct.
Yes, Washington Post, and it was your divine visit there at the same time to Pittsburgh, right after, what was it, the worst massacre in U.S. history of the Jewish people.
Correct. I arrived Saturday. Matter of fact, I was at the Chicago airport waiting for my scheduled flight. And I got a phone call from our Illinois Holocaust Museum, who arranged my speaking engagement at Chatham University in Pittsburgh. And they said, "Have you heard the news?" Who listens to the news when you're waiting for an aeroplane? So I just know what's going on. And they tell me the terrible tragedy. And should we cancel for you? I said, no way. This is more important for me to be there than any other speaking engagement I ever had. And that's how I got there. And of course, the whole city was in mourning. It was a very sad appearance, but I managed to deliver my talk to Chatham University students and faculty, and the following day to a group of high school students, and then they Skyped my presentation to about 20 other schools. So it got to be busy. So I thought, okay, that did my work, goodbye, I can go home. But it didn't quite work out that way, because the reporters from different news agencies got hold of the story and kind of coupled together the shooting, my being there at the time. So all of a sudden, my little presentation went viral, as they came in the news business.
Look at you, a 91-year-old going viral. I think that is so incredible.
Well, I am surrounded by young people, so I have to know to speak their language.
You do it really well, and you have such a youthful energy about you, obviously, which is amazing given what you've been through.
Well, one time I remember a student turned to me and said, "You have such a sad story. Don't you ever cry when you retell your story?" I said, "Well, I can't do that. If I cry, then you will cry, and everybody cries, and the story gets lost in the shuffle."
So the emotion.
So I just, the Holocaust memories are so unimaginable. I think that is about the best way I can put it 74 years later. It's unimaginable. And when I speak, I tell the audience that genocide doesn't happen from 1 minute to the next. It builds gradually. And I encourage them to protect their freedom, because next to your health, that is the most important commodity you can have.
So let's go back. So you were 17 years old, and you were in Hungary, which was one of the last. Hungary was basically aligned with Germany, so they were one of the last place. Was that right?
Correct.
To be taken over by the Nazis.
Correct. Yes.
So you were 17 years old. You had a very happy childhood, from what you share, and suddenly your life is upside down.
Well, yes. I tell you, things happen so rapidly because there are a lot of technological reasons, shall we put it that way. The Nazi group that entered Hungary to occupy Hungary, March 1944, came with 10 years of experience on how to move people out of their homes into the gas chambers. And on top of it, Hungary was, ironically, blessed with no other than Adolf Eichmann escorting the Nazi troop into Hungary, which translates to he was a perfectionist in people moving. So the Hungarian transportation went 1, 2, 3. To give you actual figures, for instance, the Nazis walk in, occupy the country. First order, all of us have to wear Jewish Star of David sewn very tightly on our clothing. Without that, we were not permitted to go out. And ironically, even tiny children who really don't know what that is, they had to have that marker. So 10 days later, new order. We are going to put into a ghetto. And here, when I talk to students, I try to explain that the ghetto in America, we understand, is when an ethnic group decides to reside in a community. But thank God they can pick up and move somewhere else. But in real life, a ghetto is formed where once they move the people into a designated ghetto area, it is fenced off and you are trapped. So now no more schooling, there's no more shopping or going to a job. Now my first discrimination happened in Hungary after I finished junior high. From junior high, the school system
while
is
the war is
while
going on.
while I'm still at home. I'm jumping back for a moment to make my point. Anyhow, I am finishing junior high, and now I'm ready to enter high school. But it's a higher level. It's almost like a junior college format of curriculum. I am discriminated against because they enacted in Hungary a law where only 1% of Jewish children are permitted into higher education. It's called in Latin numerus clausus. So my grades were good. My father could have paid for my tuition. And when you're a teenager, that hurts. You really are not that familiar with political issues.
You're young and idealistic, and all of a sudden there's this cap on you that you can't really go anywhere, and your hands are tied, everything is tied.
Exactly. So now, fast forward, here we are, we have the ghetto.
Right.
So but then here again, compared to Poland and other areas where the Nazis went there earlier, the ghetto, the length of the ghetto was longer. But in Hungary, we were put into the ghetto at the end of March, and by June 11th, of my 17th birthday, we were put on the cattle car on our way to Auschwitz.
You were put on a train car, and
yeah.
It meant there were, 80 of you crammed into a train
About
car?
About 70 to 75 people. It is an unimaginable number of people in one enclosure. Sometimes I give a tour to students at our Illinois Holocaust Museum, and I make the children come inside the empty cattle car. We have one from Germany on display. And I give a puzzle to the children. I said, okay, now look around. We had only a little shopping bag of belongings. How many people could be put into this space? So they say, oh, maybe 30, 35. So then I tell them, no, that was closer to 70, 75. We were one on top of each other, crowded together. In order to allow my parents to sit on this journey, I stood for 3 solid days, shifting from one end to the other.
The experience you describe is so visceral that you're crammed in this this basic cage for 3 days. No food, no water, basically no air, and no understanding even of what's going on and what's going to happen to you.
Precisely. The car had a tiny little window, not bigger than our laptop. And even that had a barbed wire across it. Even a baby couldn't be pushed through. So the train is traveling, and like I said, when we boarded the train, there were 2 buckets in there. One bucket for toiletry, and the other bucket with a bucket of water. Except that bucket of water was never ever refilled for 3 days. You can't fathom what physical pain thirst can be.
I can't imagine, and probably one of the most descriptive experiences you share. And there was a baby attached to its mother,
Yes,
and the baby was
baby just died right in the train. I mean, you know, probably the mother couldn't nurse. I was just a kid. I can't analyze it exactly, but it's common sense. I mean, the mother probably couldn't nurse anymore. Who knows? Or it was better dying on your mother's bosom than in the gas chambers.
Now, something you share openly is there was sort of like you talk about this scientific, psychological brainwashing so that there wasn't resistance from any of you.
Yeah. Yes. You see, I call it the Holocaust was a premeditated, scientifically coordinated mass murder. And I mean every single word. It was so precise, so in perfect order, one step to the next.
So when you get off of this, you now arrive at the
unknown destination.
At the unknown destination. Everyone's confused. You get out of there, and you, from what I understand, you guys are pushed off, you're herded. All of a sudden, your little bag of belongings is gone. You're given a flimsy nightgown and Dutch wooden shoes, and that's it.
Exactly.
And you're shaved? So explain that process.
Bald. Now, you've been a teenager, I've been a teenager. What do teenagers do? Care about their hairdos. I wasn't an indifferent, even though it was many years ago. So nevertheless, being our hair shaven was next to the biggest blow after losing my parents. You see, when we exited the train, the people were separated. Men were set up in one column. That's the last time I saw my dear father and any of the male relatives. And then the women and children were lined up in another direction. And we had to march forward, and then a group of Nazi officers were facing us, and they just pointed a finger at you. You know, then you're no longer a person. You're like a zombie.
You're a number. You're
That's
a nothing.
Mm-hmm. So my very young-looking mother was holding on to me, and I think that's all that was needed. I got the point to the right, and my mother the other way. So I waved to her. I said, "I'll see you later, Mother. I don't know what's going on." Unfortunately, I have never seen her again. So now comes a procession of events that, again, methodically done. They put you into a room where they say, "Get undressed, put down your clothes in one spot, you will get it later."
Another lie.
Another lie. Now, from the adjacent room, we hear girls screaming. I mean, screaming from the top of their lungs, and they look unrecognizable.
Their hair is shaved, their body hair is shaved.
Everything.
Every identifiable thing keeping them a human being is gone.
Correct. So it has taken us quite a bit of time until we recognize our friends. We had to look into their eyes and listen to the voice until you got acclimated to this strange look. So now from here on, we were sorted out to 500 units, 500 people that would fit into an open, fit into a room that would hold maybe 250. By the way, there's no such a thing as bed or none of that. So on the wooden floor, even that was scientifically figured out. For 500 of us, they laid us down 100 in a row, and like sardines in the can, one on top of another. The body heat was our warmth, our blanket, and the flip-flop, they took away our real shoes because shoes were very important in those days, leather shoes especially. So they gave us, I call it flip-flops with wooden sole, and it had a leather band on top of the foot. It was so hard to get used to walking in it. Underwear.
You still have a scar on your foot.
I still have a scar on my foot. And then the clothing again was.
You were given a flimsy nightgown. Is that what I
That's
understand?
right. Yeah.
Didn't
yeah.
even necessarily fit you.
But I know what I was going to say. I was going to tell you that no underwear, no socks, none of the normalcy of life. Okay, so now it's nighttime. They put us into this room. In the room in the corner, they put a bucket in for toiletry. They would not allow us to go outdoors. Now, to this day, I cannot figure out the rationale for this situation.
That part
yeah.
of the humiliation.
Because, A, we looked like people from the other world, I mean, unrecognizable, ill-fitting, and emaciated looking is bad. That's number one. Number two, we were watched and counted every damn day, excuse my language, because you had to line up the 500 of us, and there was like a supervisor counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, this counting insanity could take 2-3 hours.
Twice a day. So
Twice
like
a day.
500 of you.
You
And if
had
they miscounted, they'd go back again
Uh-huh.
and do it all over again.
Right.
And this was all part of the experiment. This was all part of keeping you in your place, keeping you, this resistance down, stripping you of your identity, keeping you humiliated, traumatized, terrified, I would imagine.
You are right on target. Exactly, exactly. So anyhow, and then food I hate to mention. It
Talk
was
about a green goop.
green liquid
Yeah.
with some unidentifiable stuff floating in it. The first day, it smelled so bad that we just turned it away. We were gagging. And the old-timers came around and said, give it to him, give it to me. Later, then we realized that this will be our main
That was it.
diet, so you better put your mind to it that this is it. So now we are here for a couple of days, and as the old-timers, how soon are we going to see our relatives who went the opposite way? They raised their arms and they pointed to the 5 chimneys. That's where your parents are. We were in absolute, total denial.
You had to be, it would seem to me, otherwise you would literally lose your mind if you had to process what was really happening to you.
Well, obviously so, but absolutely undeniable. But we kept smelling some odor. The best way I can describe it is when you kill a chicken and you put it over flame to remove the feather. That's the kind of burning smell. And of course, the chimneys were spewing out heavy dark smoke. So
And when you talk about it now, it's almost as though you're there. Are these memories as though you literally can be transported in a moment and go back to those? It feels very alive in you.
well, I've been living it, by speaking constantly. You asked me earlier, when did I start speaking about
Yes,
the
when
subject
did you start
matter?
speaking?
Well, all of us survivors started to assimilate to a new life. I am altogether 18 years old. I am alone in the world. I have a brother, but I don't know anything about him at that time. And I don't know where to go. Do I go back to the old country? What?
So let me back up just a minute,
Yeah.
because you go through this whole process. Obviously, you're at Allendorf, you're at Auschwitz, and then you have this escape and then we can go back to that. And then in an instant, you're basically found by American soldiers, and again, your life changes. But what does really freedom mean then? Your family is gone. In an instant, you realize you're basically on your own now, and you've got to figure out a life.
The best way I can answer this to you, at age 18, you have to make executive decisions.
Yes.
How does that sound? Because
You've gone from being a child or a young adult
you
to
can.
a full-fledged adult in an instant.
But I was always fortunate. I somehow attacked nice friends. And there were these 3 older sisters from my hometown, and they kind of looked over me and watched me and so forth. But on the whole, you have to go forward and somehow be very strong.
Clearly, you're very strong at 91. So, so you tell me this: your philosophy basically has three tenets: protect your freedom, think before you hate, which I think is so important, especially in today when we have such, racism still going on and nationalism is still, Nazis, all kinds of things, and stand up to the deniers. So, why is it so important for you to basically continue to tell your story? You're booked all the way through May, for heaven's sakes, and keep this alive. What do you want to accomplish from this?
Well, I'll tell you what is happening after I speak, for instance, at the school. The next day, the teacher will ask the students, so what did you learn? Write a thank you note to Mrs. Brown. So now if you know how to read their handwriting, that's another trick. But nevertheless, on the serious side, now that child puts herself into my
empathy.
Exactly. And then the comments will come. I couldn't imagine becoming an orphan at that young age, missing my parents. I couldn't imagine having my head shaven. I couldn't imagine losing my home and my other family members. I mean, it just comes back, reverberates what I have said. That is my success of speaking. When I get those letters and I know that that child listened. So like I told you, my key mantra is protect your freedom. Protect your freedom over and over again. I say it in different formats. And of course the hate stuff.
Hate is so important, and obviously I believe there was a quote from you, it might have been in that article in the Washington Post, where you talk about hatred moves faster than ever before now. So the internet is a wonderful thing, but it also, if we want to hate, we can get that message of hate around instantaneously.
I'm backstepping to the Nazi era. One of the most powerful things the Nazis had was propaganda, brainwashing. It worked.
Clearly it worked.
Clearly it worked, and even good people got kind of brainwashed. That's the best way I can put it to you. So now with the modern technology, it's 100,000 times faster and easier
to brainwash.
And I always tell the children, I said, instead of letting that kid, the bullier, the bullying, I don't know how to put it, have their say so, maybe you should turn the coin and go and help him and say, do you need some help or something? Turn some kindness to that child. Would that work? I don't know.
Well, your message is very powerful in that someone who's gone through what you've gone through, you are a big believer in, I believe you said, you've never told anyone to hate. You are a believer in love. How do you hold on to love in the midst of such incredible suffering and so many things that have happened to you and everything in your life really taken away from you?
Would you like to hear about my German boyfriend?
I'd love to hear about your German boyfriend. Now or then?
Now.
Now. Well, wonderful.
He's altogether 32 now, and he was 19 when I first met him. So.
Well, yeah, let's talk about this.
Because
Absolutely.
I thought that you will enjoy hearing about it. At our Illinois Holocaust Museum, there are German high school graduates doing volunteer work for a year.
Wow.
And their organization in Germany is called Action, Reconciliation, Service for Peace. This organization was formed 60 years ago in Germany, and their motive was to send out kids to war-torn countries, disabled people. And the Holocaust museums have heard about their existence, and now they had a big decision to make. Do I bring in a German child with the Holocaust survivor who has a pretty heavy baggage on her shoulder? And the director says, how will we know if we don't try? And they did it. And it's working as harmoniously as you could. These kids are giving their life, their heart, to just be another grandchild to the survivors.
That's incredible.
So my boyfriend,
your boyfriend,
my
your
boyfriend was 19 years old when he was serving in Chicago, and I happened to live across the street from the Holocaust Museum where he was working. So naturally, I would be called, holler across. A speaker didn't show, could you step in, whatever. So I was in the museum quite frequently. And the weather started changing in Chicago, the fall time, and I said, you know what, Gregor? Bring a toothbrush, and you can stay at my house. I have an empty bedroom. I'll feed you, and you can just walk across the street in 2.5 seconds instead of using 2 buses from Chicago to come into the suburbs. And thus a lifelong friendship started.
That's a beautiful friendship. And I would imagine you've had a massive impact on him, and he's going to have a massive impact on younger generations.
Okay, now let me tell you the massive impact.
Yeah.
That organization invited me last May to Berlin.
Oh, you've gone back a number of times, so let's talk about that.
Chronologically, but
Yeah.
I mean, since we brought that up, I just thought I'd mention it. Yeah.
What is it like for you to go back? What was it like the first time for you to go back? You visited Allendorf, I believe.
Well, it was a new revelation of seeing my friends. The friends I was with, there were like, out of 1,000 of us, they were able to gather with their escorts about 350 people, which is beautiful. So, when, especially girls from my hometown, and all of a sudden, where do you live? Where do you live? And a new friendship began.
So these were people that you were actually in the Holocaust
in the
with
camp.
at the time? In the
Correct.
camps?
Yes.
Wow.
So I met those people, so we started reconnecting. Matter of fact, I have a dear friend, Eva. The photo that you saw, the 3 people,
Yes.
Eva is one of them. Olga, the third lady, the dark complexion, she has passed away a few years ago, but Eva outdoes my speaking territory.
Very nice.
She travels in Europe all over and talks. She's a very intelligent young lady of age 93 or whatever. She speaks 4 languages and superb.
Do you find the survivors who are on your age that are really getting to potentially the end of your lives and the end of being able to share the story are more on fire than ever before to keep the story alive in order to help heal and make sure this doesn't happen again?
Well, I cannot speak for other people as far as, depending on their mental
then,
ability,
personally.
their health. But at our Illinois Holocaust Museum, we have a hologram of 3 survivors, and that will live on forever.
Mm-hmm.
So that is one way of maintaining the story. And some of us who are still able to, we are going and talking, and then there are some who will not say a word.
Now, given the space that we live in today, where there is a lot of division, clearly you're in Pittsburgh, you see this, horrific situation. Like I said, one of the I think largest massacre in U.S. history of Jewish people on our grounds, which is crazy. Do you ever see this happening again, or what's the solution to make sure this never happens again?
I wish I was smart enough to give you an intelligent answer of solution.
In your heart.
In my heart, myself, doing what I feel is right to do. By talking with you and talking to school children and promoting freedom and promoting the elimination of hate. And I am a positive thinker. I am a believer that they listen and that it can benefit the world. And the person, the bad guy in Pittsburgh, I wouldn't have put him in jail. I would make him go through 1 month of Auschwitz life, step by step. I think that would be a good lesson.
Again, empathy and compassion, that's the way they'd have to walk the walk to understand.
Yeah, because you can have a big mouth. You can hate and say nasty things, but try to walk those steps.
Yeah. That's a whole other show, trying to reform our prison system. I think it's a very wise idea because I think you'd get a lot more reform a lot quicker than the way we do it now. So how can you, coming through, like I said, this situation, which we're only able to really talk about a small amount, so we can really talk about what we want to do with that. You've been through horrific hatred. How do you stay in a space of love? How do you stay in a space of positivity? How do you stay with a faith in God? And you call it God.
Okay, I'll give you one example. About 10 years ago, I was invited to New Zealand at the annual Eucharistic Catholic Convention to speak. I've done my job, and a young man approached me and said, both my grandfathers were Nazi officers. Now they are in purgatory. So when we go back to the church program of the event, and I look into Jesus Christ's picture, I would very much appreciate seeing your face of forgiveness in Jesus' photo. Would you say it's a kind of a powerful question?
That's powerful. That's very powerful.
So I told you that God and I have a good connection.
Clearly.
And that works. So I told him, I said, young man, in the Jewish religion, the holiest holiday is the Day of Atonement. We fast and we pray. And among our prayers, we pray for forgiveness for all our sins that we have committed the previous year, so we can start the new year with a clear heart. And then I threw in a little addition, and I said, and even our perpetrators should, we ask for even our bad guys, should be cleared from all their bad doings to start a new year. If you have ever seen a face of relief on the child's face, it was worth the whole trip.
So one thing I don't hear you talk about in a lot of the interviews is your parents and your own mourning and grieving. And I believe, not just in your story, but in stories I've read of survivors, you almost have to compartmentalize that when you come back to be able to get on with a life and move forward. So was there a period you went through major grieving and mourning and going through, allowing those emotions to
in
come
the
up?
Context that grieving stays on forever.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you cannot forget it. But you see, I call it from slavery to freedom, the assimilation with a new society, a new culture, new language, finding a profession, getting married. I mean, there's so many steps to start going forward that kind of oversteps the morning's time. The morning is forever there. I mean, I have pictures of my parents that I found. So, it's there. But you have to go forward because life goes on.
So in order to really function and be able to go back, like you said,
Yes.
if you go backwards and live in that space, it's going to prevent you from moving forward and creating this life that you did.
I have a little saying. I say that you have to have faith, fantasy, drive, determination, and belief that tomorrow will be better.
And clearly you live from that space.
Well, I try.
Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl is obviously probably one of the foremost authorities from the Holocaust. And he talks, man's search for meaning, that in order for people really to, they have to have meaning from the suffering. So for you, what is the meaning from your suffering?
The meaning is that I have forgiven everyone. Mm-hmm. And like I told you about my young friend in Germany, I consider him as part of the family. I met his family my recent trip to Germany, and I was welcomed as warm as a relative would be. So I have forgiven everyone. I could have not said that soon after the tragedies because the pain was just too acute. But as time went on and you get older, you want to go to the great beyond with a clear conscience.
So was forgiveness for you, is that a process? Is that an internal decision? Was it at some point in your life you just decided, I don't want, like you said, this baggage, I don't want to carry it anymore, or like you said, also wanting to leave this space with a beautiful heart?
It comes gradually.
Mm-hmm.
It comes gradually. You grow older. Maybe they say when you're older, you are smarter. I don't know. But nevertheless, I mean, that was my logic behind. I mean, listen, let's put it this way. Germany today is not the Nazi era. It's a totally different lifestyle.
It is a totally different thing. Thank goodness
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah.
So what is your message to people out there right now that might be in a space of, great pain? Maybe they've gone through some personal tragedy. And I know you talk about suffering is relative. Obviously, nobody can imagine the kind of suffering, but no matter what, if you're suffering, whatever pain you're going through, and you're in a space of hatred, you're in a space of pain, you want to hurt people, what's your message to those people out there right now?
Believe in God and go forward.
God, a higher power, something bigger and
There
greater.
is, I mean, I'm trying not to be a preacher sounding
Yeah, I
here,
totally understand
but
that. So, yeah.
I mean, that you have to
Something
feel.
positive, a
That you
positive
have to
force.
feel within.
You
Nobody
do.
can pound it into your head.
Yeah.
But you have to believe in something.
Greater than
Greater
yourself.
th-
And again, that's that meaning, right? Something greater than
Correct.
yourself that allows you to have meaning and
Yes.
purpose.
Yeah.
So our audience is generally women at midlife and beyond, which, we have women 20 to 80. Now, hopefully we have you in there, so up to 91. A lot of women in our culture, because especially in the American culture, when you are older, you're sort of cast aside and to be invisible and no longer productive and you're no longer relevant and all these crazy things. Well, you're 91. You're kicking ass. You're booked all the way through May. So what's your message to women at midlife and beyond out there who might be losing belief in themselves, losing faith in themselves, buying into the stereotypes or, our cultural brainwashing, like you say?
Get away from the television and find some outside interest. Whether it's a luncheon with the ladies, whether it's a book club, whether it's other social. There are so many social activities available for seniors. There are so many senior clubs. Do it.
Community, connections, support, and then also finding something like of meaning, passion, purpose for yourself.
Something. I mean, some people like to crochet, other people like to write. I mean, we are all involved with different interests. So whatever work, there should be a little bit more than getting up and taking care of the necessities of daily functioning. There should be an extra. And all of a sudden you get so involved that you forget about your aches and pains. Because at our age,
There's going to be some aches and pains.
yeah, but we call it, I am functioning, and that takes care of my health.
In other words, you don't focus on it. You focus on the wellness and clearly leaving this world a better place and a brighter place.
Well, thank you for saying it, but I do try to do that. I do try my very best because in these troubled times, I'm repeating myself, but the genocide really doesn't happen from 1 minute to the next. Builds gradually, and again, over and over again, is just to have your freedom maintained, and we'll be
And like
lucky,
you
happy people.
You say, I think that's so true. It does, it builds gradually, and all of a sudden there's this tipping point, right? Because like the war happened, there was this whole process going on behind the scenes of planning this egregious, horrific situation. But there's a tipping point, and all of a sudden we go from this space to this space. Life changes in an instant, and all of a sudden we're at war. Do you see anything like that happening, given, a lot of nationalistic things going on right now?
Unfortunately, I have a friend, but I don't have her poem, but the title of it is Scapegoats Again. It says, Hitler never disappeared, he only slumbers. And once a loudmouth starts promoting his message, people listen and follow the leader. And this is what my fear is, the opposite. The ones who are promoting hate, the ones who are promoting discrimination. I think discrimination to be discriminated is so painful. So they should think on those terms.
When you talk about really Hitler slumbering, it's really an energy. Hitler is an energy of hatred, right? Hitler's an energy of anti-empathy, anti-compassion, really. So how do we, as a culture, as a society, come together in love? How do we get this message of love out there?
Okay, think about going to church. You go to church. What do you hear at church? I mean, what will the pastor say? be good to your fellow man,
Mhm.
and so on. You know, I mean,
And it's this ripple effect,
exactly.
the power of the ripple. So we want the love to build and be this ripple effect to
Exactly,
overcome
and
the
that
darkness.
it can be done. It can be done. Not so much love that we
Like romantic love.
romancing
It's a
of.
different-
I am talking about spending time. For instance, in the senior clubs, listen to that fellow person who is really ill, and maybe just talking to somebody will make that person feel better and forget about the aches and pains.
Love is an understanding. It's an action. It's something someone can do.
Very
And be.
easily.
Mhm.
It doesn't require money. It doesn't require too much thinking. It should come from the heart.
So one thing in all the research I did on Holocaust survivors is this this need to compartmentalize and this need to really, let's say you're a child, you were 17, there were obviously babies, there were very, very young children where their lives changed in an instant, and they had to go from babies, young children, young adults to adults in an absolute instant. And they talk about that their sort of their psychological development had to stop there at some point. So that little child is still there. Do you find that in yourself? Do you find that 17-year-old still?
Well, you know, I'm going to kind of twist this statement around. When my children were 17, I lived through their lives, okay? And my granddaughters were 17, I lived through their, in a context of, you know, enjoying what they were doing, enjoying their progress, enjoying their school advancements and so on. So I was blessed with having a beautiful family.
So it sounds like part of your coping mechanism, your healthy coping mechanism, was really living vicarious through them, so it felt like that young girl was able sort of to have those experiences, but through other generations.
True, and also I was a very fortunate girl because my relatives brought me to America, so I had a place to live and be loved. And I had a good fortune of getting acquainted with a Hungarian Jewish doctor, and I worked in his office for 40 years.
Wow, that's impressive.
Thank you.
That is very impressive.
Thank you. It was, I tell you, it's a lot of people communication.
It is
I tell you a funny one, if I may.
You go ahead. This is your deal.
One morning, I am taking an elderly lady's blood pressure in the office, and she looks at me and said, "Magda, what's the matter? Don't you like me anymore? You're not smiling." I said, "Mrs. Waddles," I remember her name. I said, "I had a terrible toothache last night, and I am just trying to be here." But you know how people read your emotions? So, the 40 years was fantastic. When the doctor asked me to work in his office, I said, "Doctor, I know nothing about a medical office. Don't worry about it. I'll teach you everything." And he kept his word.
That is.
I did
incredible.
x-rays, I did cardiograms, I drew blood, I did legal records to attorneys and whatever you want. No.
Sounds like you had an incredible positive energy that allowed you to really attract all the people in your life to really help you move forward in a positive way.
Right. I'll tell you another funny one. I am in America maybe a month or so, and there was a gentleman who was from my hometown but came to America before the war and knew my family and asked to come over. So gentleman comes, and he comes with a giant shopping bag packed with Hungarian newspapers, Hungarian books, poetry books, whatever you want. "Thank you very much." The man leaves. My very sturdy American auntie turns to me and said, "Do you want to remain a Hungarian all your life, or do you want to learn to speak English?" I said, "No, auntie, I want to learn to speak English." I never saw the contents of the trash bag. It went. She threw it out, but I learned to speak English.
Well, clearly you learned to speak English and very well. Yeah,
Thank
I can't
you.
even imagine if we were to go back in that point in time what that would be like to all of a sudden everything is gone. You're in a new country, a new world, a new language, a new everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The assimilation for some people was harder than for me because I had relatives, but and also I had another great plus. I happened to find a nice Jewish American boy in Chicago
Mr. Brown.
Mr. Brown, and we had a good life together. And he was a very supporting man. I mean, I could do all my crazy stuff, and he supported me.
What was it like for him marrying a Holocaust survivor and, like you said, all that stuff inside? Because he didn't have that experience, right?
Correct. I'll tell you how that happened. In the 1970s, there was an upcoming Nazi group in Chicago, you may have heard of, and they were attempting to march and show their power. Matter of fact, Danny Kaye made a movie of it, Skokie. It was a big happening.
I do kind of remember that.
And it was a big event. So, and we were getting some very racial telephone calls. So I tell my husband, I said, oh my God, it's starting again. Oh, come on, stop worrying. This is America, it can't happen. Okay? Because actually, Holocaust studies or teaching was non-existent. Okay? So like when my son was a little boy, in the
there wasn't
50s,
information
60s,
like there is
nothing.
now.
But then after this attempted march, all the survivors came out of the woodwork, shall we say, who kept absolutely silent before that, trying to recreate a new life. So now the survivors got together and said that never again should really mean never again. So they formed a little museum.
The Holocaust Museum
The Holocaust
in
Museum in Skokie, and now we have a bigger museum. Matter of fact, I can do a little bragging. Our museum was nominated among the 10 best museums in the country last year.
That is amazing. You know, I have not been to it, so that is, I'm going to get to that Holocaust Museum in Skokie.
It is. Now, I tell you, I describe it to you this way. You walk in the door, it's like opening up a history book.
It's amazing.
It is chronologically displayed from 33 on and so on. Whoever did, the curators, whoever arranged that kind of display was exceptionally well done. Then they have docents who escort the visiting groups, and these are mostly retired teachers, so they know exactly how to deal with the kids. And then they have Holocaust survivor speakers on call if they have a large group coming in.
So we're getting to the end of our time together, and I want to make sure, number one, people know where to find you, but I said today, number one. Number two, I want to make sure people can find you. Number one, what is the one thing, if you wanted to, leave a pearl of wisdom behind, what is the one thing you want people to know? What's your legacy?
Do not hate.
Do not hate, no matter what.
No. Look at the coin from both sides. Why do you hate that person? What has that person done to you?
Because hatred comes oftentimes from ignorance, doesn't it?
Yes, but I don't want to insult anybody.
Well, or ignorance meaning not an understanding,
lack of understanding. That's a better point.
Lack of understanding.
Lack of understanding of the other side of the coin.
So if you, again, back to that, rather than jailing somebody who did horrific things, put them in some kind of situation where they actually have to create empathy and have to experience what that person experienced.
Precisely. Once they walk that road, I hope they would think differently.
Yeah. So love is the answer, isn't it?
It sure is. It always works.
Yeah. Love, positivity, faith, all of those things.
Yes.
So now if people want to find you, if they want to go to your talks, you're booked through May, as I said many times, which is so crazy impressive.
Yes.
They go to magdabrown.com.
Correct.
So you are on the web. You are pretty hip and cool for a 91-year-old, right?
Well, can I do 1 minute of bragging?
You can brag.
I
all you
have
want to.
a
I think
journalist, social media granddaughter who happens to be the personal social media director to the Melinda Gates.
Well, that is impressive.
It sure
oh my
is.
Goodness. Well, that deserves
I had
some
to do
major
that
bragging.
I have other grandchildren who are
exactly.
equally talented, but in context of our conversation. So she is the one who actually created that website on the internet.
That is impressive. And you guys got to check it out, magdabrown.com. There's actually a whole series of videos that talks about your story. I mean, I wish we could share it all, but it's a long story from the beginning until...
Right. Magda Brown, Holocaust, on the internet, you know, it will come up.
magdabrown.com, and then check out the videos. And
some of my actual speeches from that was recorded on YouTube, that might be on there too.
So you guys visit magdabrown.com. We want to keep this story alive. We want to take from this positivity and love and compassion and understanding, and to make sure this never, ever happens again.
Amen.
Amen, sister. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on here today, and thank you for bringing. She's got a fan club here. We've got her son and her granddaughter. So you're clearly having a massive impact on younger generations, and I thank you for that.
Well, I have to be very humble, but I hope that they listen, and I know they do.
I have a feeling we have a pretty compassionate audience out there too, listening, and you're making quite an impact.
Well,
so,
thanks to you, it helps a step further.
Well, thank you for being here, and thank you for being here. If Magda can do this at 91, anyone out there listening today, if you're a woman at midlife and beyond and you've lost faith or belief in yourself, if you can do this, anybody can do anything. So sky's the limits. Cheers, beauties. Stay fierce.